welcome to my podcast. It's Debbie Miller. Welcome to Move or Improve with Debbie. And today we're going to talk with Don Frutchey, who is a loan officer. And I've asked him to really come on the show to talk about how to finance the purchase of your next home if you haven't sold your existing home, or should you sell the home first and then buy? And that's an issue that comes up quite often with my clients, and I just want Don to be able to clarify some things and just talk about some strategies. And I think he's the right person to do this because, well, he's only done over 500 million in successful transactions, so he does know a thing or two. And he has experience with jumbo loans, conforming loans, FHA, VA, construction loans, lots of different things. And he's been around a long time. Not that he's real old, but he's very smart and savvy, and he's the perfect person to talk to us today about this. So welcome, Don. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm happy to be here. I really appreciate the invitation and look forward to imparting some valuable information to your listeners.
Well, let's get right on it then. I'm sure, I run into this a lot. People are saying, well, I don't want to take any money out of my retirement account. How do I get the money? I don't have my house sold yet. But obviously, qualifying for a new home purchase before you sell is the best route. You have to find out what you can afford. And so talk a little bit about what you mean when you say qualifying for a new home purchase before selling is the best way to go.
It absolutely is. And as we'll discover, there are some challenges that go along with that. But the advantages to selling or to buying your home before selling, obviously, you want to go into a purchase with as few contingencies in the contract as you can. In a seller's market that any contingency you put into the contract will limit the success you might have in getting a ratified contract. So we want to limit the number of contingencies with any offer that you put in. And one of the biggest contingencies that might cause issues is a sale of home contingency. Any seller that sees that, or seller's agent that sees that, automatically is going to go to the next contract because that causes or can cause some delays in any settlement that they take. So I want to make sure that we're limiting the contingencies. Another advantage to purchasing a home prior to selling is that you can still live as you like. You don't have to deal with any house showings to potential buyers. You don't have to clean up. You don't have to vacate the house when they are coming over. You don't have to gather up the pets and kids and clean up the kitchen. Just a lot simpler in that regard. So that I'm sure that you've seen many clients who have had to go through that process, and it's not easy, is it?
No, but it is less stressful. If I can move you out safely, then you're in your new place. And like you said, you don't have to deal with all the stuff that goes on with a showing, but I can go in then and my contractors can work quickly and much faster to get the house painted and make the repairs and all that sort of stuff. And then that way you don't have to deal with people coming in and out all day. And the house is then ready, and it will sell faster once we do get it ready. So yes, that is very much so. But other contingencies, just to mention while we're talking about contingency, a contingency is a condition that's placed on the contract. For example, a home inspection would be a contingency. A radon inspection could be a contingency. Sale of home is a contingency. And like Don said, an appraisal is a contingency. You don't want to have any more contingencies than you absolutely have to. And so those are some of the other contingencies. So I personally wouldn't even bother writing an offer with a sale of home contingency. I would have them sit down with Don first to figure out how to get the money so you can go in with a strong offer.
Right. So as we start reviewing a client's file to see if they can purchase before selling, we're going to go through the standard pre-approval process and review their credit, their income, their assets, and ultimately calculate their debt-to-income ratio. This is the ratio that will dictate everything. So if they can qualify using their existing home payment, all of their monthly debt, and the payment from the new home, then they will be able to make the purchase. Now, obviously, then it boils down to where's the money going to come from? Typically, when people are selling their house, they're going to be deriving some portion, if not all, of the down payment from the sale of their house. So then the challenge is, okay, where can we get the funds for the down payment? I had a couple recently retired. They had paid off their home, but wanted to actually upsize to handle a growing extended family. They had equities that could be used as collateral to borrow on margin for the down payment on the new home. They did qualify. They had their Social Security income, their pension, their retirement distributions. That could cover all of their existing debt, including a car they had, taxes and insurance on the existing home, credit card minimum payments, and the new mortgage. With all of that included, they did qualify and were under the maximum debt-to-income ratio for this particular purchase. So they were able to use the equities and borrow on margin. That's one of the options that is available. In many cases, that people that are looking to move have that option, but we see most that actually don't have that option. So other options that might be available to come up with a down payment, you could always cash out your stocks, mutual fund, retirement accounts. I don't necessarily, in particular when it comes to retirement accounts, I don't necessarily recommend that. I like to see people keep the retirement funds intact, because once people cash out of retirement funds, they tend to not replenish those. And that, in terms of a long-term financial strategy, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, in terms of cashing out stocks and mutual funds, that is a viable option if they are ready mentally to replenish those assets when they sell their house. So if they've got equity in their house, and once they sell their house, they take those proceeds, make the investment purchases that they just cash out of to put them back in a better position.
So it sounds like they should sit down with their financial advisor first and figure out what makes sense, and then come to you, and you would work with the financial advisor to make sure everything goes smoothly and that they're doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got one client that's going to be meeting with her financial advisor this Thursday to do just that. They're cashing out a few of her stocks to fund the down payment before they sell their house to avoid this contingency. So yeah, it's a conversation with the financial advisor is always the first step to make sure that they can, number one, and number two is that it's the right course of action for them to take.
For sure. And so what are some other options?
Other options, if you're fortunate enough to have a family member that can fund a down payment, doesn't have to be a full down payment, but even a smaller down payment, that might be an option as well. Obviously, there are guidelines that we have to follow for gifts. One thing that many clients don't realize is that we are beholden to the Patriot Act, and that we have to verify where all deposits come from. So in other words, if we see a large deposit, and a large deposit in our eyes can be as little as $500. Once we see that, we have to verify where those funds came from. Not only that it came from an allowable source for the underwriting guidelines, but also that it meets the Patriot Act requirements in that the funds weren't derived from an illegal source. So we want to make sure that the gift comes from a family member or another allowable source. Typically it is a family member, but in some cases workplaces have programs set up to where they can give an underwriting gift. Then we'll move on.
Yeah.
Next option. Yeah.
I had an interesting situation a number of years ago where I had a house that I sold, and the people who bought it were U.S. citizens. However, the down payment was $250,000. And I said, well, how are you getting that much money? Because they were only in their 30s, and it's not that they couldn't save, but 250 was a lot. And they said, well, we're getting money from each of our parents. So I said, well, yeah, we have to have verification on this. And the problem was the parents lived in Korea, and the amounts that were allowed to be taken out at any given time were smaller than the 250,000. So we had a total of, I think it was like 10 gift letters, because
Right.
that family all divvied up the money,
Yeah.
and it was crazy. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think we're going to make it, but we did get it done. But you do have to follow the guidelines. And I had another person one time say, well, I have money that I've saved, but it's all in under my, it's the under my mattress concept. And I said, well, you know what, I think you need to work on that one too, because that's not going to work.
Right. Right. Well, the deposits and the asset verification have always been a hurdle that we have to get over. So even before I issue a pre-approval letter, I'm giving them information in big, bold letters stating that the asset verification is a very problematic issue, and just be aware that you may not like the process that we have to go through to verify assets, but it won't stop the process. It'll just take a little bit more effort on the client's part. But next option.
I think one other thing to just interject about while we're talking about approval letters, I think people, if you haven't bought or sold in a long time, regardless of whether you buy or sell, you want to see a lender approval letter. And I'll talk just a minute about, Don, what should be in that approval letter and why do you need it? Because that to me is one of the most crucial parts, because the lender is really not a party to the contract itself, but the lender letter needs to be from a reputable lender, preferably locally based and not a big bank. But talk just for a minute, because if you're a buyer, you need to get pre-approved to prove the seller that they should sell to you. And if you're a seller, you want to see that pre-approval letter. So talk a little bit about what should be in it, just a minute or two.
Right. Sure. That's a critical point, and one that I was trying to make a distinction between a pre-qualification letter and a pre-approval letter. A
Right.
Pre-qualification letter is when you go to one of these online banks and you fill in your data, and they say, hey, you're pre-approved. That's what they will call it in many cases. You're pre-approved for a purchase up to X dollars. Unfortunately, when a listing agent looks at that and they see pre-approval, they think that much more work has been done on the file than actually has been done. For my pre-approval letters, I always review credit, the client's tax returns for the last 2 years, their W-2s, their most recent pay stubs, as well as their asset documentation. I want to make sure that I review, so any potential brick walls or even speed bumps can be identified before the process. And there are many cases where I will identify some things that need to be taken care of in the credit. In fact, I just had one last week where we took care of last week, where we identified one particular item in a credit report that, if taken care of, I could actually reduce the interest rate that they had. So it's important that we look at all of these in a holistic manner. And then when I write a pre-approval letter and I state all of these elements have been reviewed, that listing agent will have more confidence in that particular contract offer. And it allows me, when I talk to the listing agent, to confirm that I have in fact reviewed those items, have done a preliminary underwrite on the file, and then they can have a great confidence that that file is going to be, will get to settlement on time.
Absolutely. And I really feel sorry for buyers who say, but I just want to go look at this place because I really like it. Well, it's about $150,000 more than they can afford or whatever. So the pre-approval letter keeps them in check and prevents them from going to see stuff that they can't afford, even if they wanted to, unless they robbed a bank or some crazy thing. So the pre-approval letter, the pre-approval process, I just don't even sit down with anybody until they've talked to you about what can they afford, because why should I spend my time showing them stuff that they can't afford? And anyway,
Absolutely.
one of the things